Hello and welcome to part 6 of Beautiful Chord Progressions with me, Fake Dr. Levin. In today's lesson, I'm going to show you a chord progression that will help you move from one key to another. And in order to understand and use this concept, we've got to learn about the dominant 7th chord, which is a very special chord. So, what is a dominant 7th chord? Well, on a basic level, a dominant 7th chord is a chord that creates a bit of tension. Not a ton of tension, but a bit of tension, but then resolves really nicely to chords that are down 5 notes from the dominant 7th chord. So let's say your dominant 7th chord is here in space. It will sound all tense, and then it will resolve really nicely to chords that are 5 notes below it. Resolved in a less abstract hand puppet kind of way. In a musical example, in other words, if we had, let's say, a G dominant 7, well, G is 5 notes above C. C1, D2, E3, F4, G5. So G would be 5 if C is 1. So then G7, or in other words, G dominant 7, would resolve really nicely to a C chord. It could be C major or C minor. Here's what that would sound like. Here's a G dominant 7, which is 5 notes above, G is 5 notes above C. So if we go from this G dominant 7 chord to a C major chord, so resolved. Here's another way to play it. It's the classic cowboy chord version. Let's get a quick zoom in. For all you guitarists, G7, and then it resolves nicely to C. Let's find another example. What if we wanted to resolve really badly, let's say to an F major chord? So here's an F major chord. Let's say we really want to set up a resolution to this F major chord. We'd have to find, well, one of our options would be to find a dominant 7th chord that resolves nicely to this F major. So how could you go about doing that? Well, what you'd need to do is you'd have to search up from F. You'd have to look 5 notes up above F to find the dominant 7th chord that would resolve nicely down to F. So you could do this by going up the F major scale to the 5th note. F is 1, G is 2, A is 3, B flat is 4, and then C is 5. So that means that a C dominant 7th chord would resolve really nicely down to F. So if you really want to get to that F chord and you don't know how, C dominant 7 is one great option. So I'm just going to play a bunch of random chords, then I'm going to play a C7 and resolve to F. So random chords. C7. So it doesn't matter what came before it. Once you get to that C7 down to F, everything just seems to have come to a close. It's a really great way to create a state of rest and a state of resolution. So the reason why a dominant 7th chord resolves so well to chords down a 5th are based on the way these chords are structured, based on what's in the chords and how well they voice lead to chords down a 5th. So you'll remember that in one of the earlier lessons, I believe it is lesson 4, we were talking about voice leading smoothly, which is when you go from one chord to another by changing very little about it. The example we had one example where we went from this E minor, E, B, G, to a C major, E, C, G. Very smooth voice leading here. So it works out that dominant 7th chords resolve super nicely to major or minor chords that are down a 5th from the dominant 7th chord because you can smoothly voice lead from the most tense notes in the dominant 7th chord to some of the most beautiful notes in the major or minor chord that you will find 5 notes below it. So for example, with G7 resolving down 5 notes to C, the G7 chord's most tense moment, which is this tritone interval right here, this tritone resolves really smoothly to this sound, which is the essence of the C major sound. So this smooth voice leading between dissonance and consonance leads to a very nice resolution. So now let's take a look at the transcription and see how we can take a dominant 7th chord moving down 5 notes to a minor chord to change keys to a new minor key. So let's say we start out with an A minor chord and we're thinking, alright, I want to change keys here. Maybe we're in A minor for a while and I'm looking to change keys to E minor. So what you could do is you'd have to find a dominant 7th chord that is 5 notes above an E minor chord so that it will resolve down very nicely to that E minor. And so it happens to be B dominant 7, which is that 7th chord that is 5 notes above E minor. So B7 is the chord we're looking for. In the transcription, I have B7 written out like this. And so this will be our B dominant 7, and it will resolve very nicely to this E minor. And look how smooth that voice leading is. This just has to move down a whole step. These notes just have to move up a half step. This one stays where it is, and then this moves up a half step. So things are barely moving. The voice leading is so smooth, and yet it sounds so resolved. So A minor. That stuff in the key of A minor. Now here's our preparation with the B7 chord, and then resolution to E minor. Now E sounds like the home bass, and we are in the key of E minor now. Let's try this example moving from a G major chord, and we're going to move to the key of D minor. So first I'll set up G major chord by playing some music in the key of G major. Let's do the money progression from earlier. Now we're really in the key of G. And now I'm going to prepare for D minor by grabbing a dominant 7th chord that is 5 notes above the D minor we want to get to. That chord happens to be A7, which I have written for you like this. And we're going to use that to resolve to D minor, and we'll be in the key of D minor. So we'll do the money progression in G major and then change keys to D minor using the dominant 7th chord to help us change. We are nice and comfortably within D minor. Do that again for you. So now we find ourselves in D minor, and you can do whatever you want in the key of D minor from there. So it's a fairly big concept in that it's very important. It's widely used in music theory. You know, you'll hear people talking about dominant 7th chords resolving down a 5th in so many instances of music, and you can use it. It's powerful resolution to resolve to new keys. So I'd recommend experimenting, improvising, and playing in one key, and then saying, well, what would happen if I moved from like this B major key to like E flat minor, okay? So first you have to think, well, what's a dominant 7th chord that's 5 notes above E flat? So go ahead and see if you can figure that out. A dominant 7th chord that is 5 notes above E flat can be found by going 5 notes up an E flat major scale, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat. And so that is your answer right there, B flat dominant 7th chord. So now we'll play a B flat dominant 7th chord to resolve to the key of E flat minor. So B major time. And now we're in E flat minor.